Welcome to another episode of Live from the Blue Seats. I'm your host, Rob, joined this week by John-Luc Shapiro. That's right, producer JL, as always, behind the virtual glass, as we like to say. So JL is here along with Nick, Brooklyn Joker 90 of 30 on Broadway fame, Twitter fame, however you might know Nick. Always appreciate his takes, his insights, and of course, when he gets to join us on the pod, that's always a bonus. So we are so excited to be talking about the Eastern Conference Finals. The New York Rangers are back in the NHL's Final Four for the second time in 3 seasons. And how about this, guys? The 5th time in the last 13 seasons. Pretty cool accomplishment, although obviously we want them to keep it going. The conference finals are not a marker of success this season. So we'll obviously talk about that and the impending matchup with the Florida Panthers, but we do also want to wax poetic a bit about the Rangers' 6-game triumph over Carolina, particularly the heroics in Game 6 of Chris Kreider, Igor Shesterkin, all that good stuff. So, gentlemen, how are we doing on this fine and very, very warm, almost summer-like Tuesday night as we record ahead of the Eastern Conference Finals here?
I guess maybe
jump in at any time.
I guess maybe that brief moment of silence is just how we're feeling. It's just absolutely not stunned, but just more of like a good shock, all things considered. I'm feeling great. I love the way that they came back and won the other night, and it just feels really nice to be a Ranger fan right now, knowing that this team is basically one round away from playing for the Stanley Cup. So I'm feeling good.
I mean, I'm still kind of in a state of shock, and I don't think that's going to go away until puck drop on Wednesday night, because just the way that game went down was incredible. It really was. Like that one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life.
So I want to ask you both, as a kind of way to start this discussion, if you had to rate on, let's say, a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like, I'm fine, and 10 like all hope is lost. Where were you in terms of hopelessness after 2 periods on God, what I don't even know what day of the week it was, but after Game 6, Thursday. Got it. Okay, thank you, JL. JL,
I was
with you. Or go ahead, Nick. Yeah, whoever.
No, I was about an 8.5. Like I was, after the way things had went in Game 5 and the first 40 minutes of Game 6, and not even just the first 40 minutes, the first 5 or so minutes of the third period of Game 6, it just felt like they really were going to force what was, a Game 7 that never should have been. And thank God Chris Kreider saved the day and, took over and led like we've only seen Mark Messier do, and saved this team literally from itself.
Yeah, I was at like a 9. I was at a work event, so I was watching the game on my phone when I was able to do it, and the work event ended at around the end of the second period, midway through the third, and didn't really see much, so I was already resigned to the fact that this was going to go 7. So much to my delight, when I checked in a little bit later after the work event had ended, or the ceremony that I was a part of, I took a look at my phone again and saw that the score was beginning to get close, and that's when it changed. But before that, I was at about an 8 or a 9. I thought we were playing Saturday for sure, because if there's anything about my sports teams that I've learned over the last 30-something years of my life, is that they never make it easy, and I just won't be able to enjoy things like everybody else can in other cities. So, but good thing that wasn't the case.
I'm right there with you guys. Definitely 8, 9, 9.5. And I actually want to focus on what you said, Nick, about the first 5 minutes of the third period, because, in a lot of ways, and if you try, it's really hard, right? Because to do this, because you're going to look back on that game and your recollection of that game, especially over time, is going to change. The Rangers had played an okay game. It was certainly better than game 5. They actually generated a decent amount of offense. They didn't allow Carolina to get a ton, but Carolina scored on the chances they got. So they almost kind of reversed Rangers it in a way. Like, they got fewer chances than the Rangers, but they scored on theirs. But then the first 5 minutes of the third was like an onslaught by Carolina. They smelled blood. They went for it. Igor makes a couple of big saves. They also hit a couple of posts. I know Martinuk hit the bar. Gensel hit the post. And yeah, I mean, it really felt like they just had nothing. And, look, Mark Messier, certainly the echoes of 94 are so prominent. They have been all year. You mentioned Messier and, of course, the natural hat trick in the third period to win a game 6. Of course, this was a clinching game in Kreider's case, but also the Mike Richter, Igor Shesterkin parallel is there as well, because in that game, which again, a lot of our audience may not have been alive for it, but it's online if you want to go back and watch that game, even like a condensed version of it. The Devils absolutely owned the first 2 periods of that game, and Mike Richter, they were up 2-0 and could have made it 3-4, 5-0. Richter stood on his head, kept the Rangers in it. Rangers eventually, get the Kovalov goal at the end of the second, and then the natural hat trick from Messier in the third to win the game. But Igor plays the exact same role that Richter did in that 94 game, where he played great throughout the game, but especially in the third period. And then after the Rangers are up 4-3, they're holding on. Kreider's goal was the last shot on goal they got until the empty netter. He makes that outrageous save on Svechnikov right in the slot. Dead red scoring chance. Nobody between Svechnikov and the goalie, 11 feet out, whatever it was. And Igor just calmly flicks it away with his blocker. Just incredible stuff from him. He's been a rock. And like you said, Nick, Chris Kreider was just incredible. And scoring goals the way that he has learned and mastered over the last few years of his career, right? Around the net, deflection, around the net, banging home a rebound, around the net, stick down, stronger than the guys around him, cashing in on a beautiful feed from Lindgren. I mean, just great stuff all around.
Oh, yeah. No, picture perfect. Oh, no, like it was picture perfect. That's one of those where, you knew if they were going to score in game 6, they were going to have to get an ugly one at some point. The second one was not the prettiest goal you're ever going to see, but doesn't matter how, it matters how many. And that one got them going, and it got their mojo. And I mean, that was the most Freddie Anderson-esque goal I've ever seen him give up. And I was just, and that was the one, like I've always joked about Freddie, going back to Anaheim. He doesn't give up a lot, but the ones he gives up are just soul crushing. And that second goal, that one just lets all the air out of the balloon, because Carolina then has to feel like, oh God, there's a lot of time here left, and he gave that up. What else is he going to give up? So it got the Rangers going, and it totally deflated the Canes.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say too is that if you listen to the Sportsnet feed of the go-ahead goal, Harnarayan Singh, I want to make sure I get that right. Harnarayan Singh did essentially similar. He did a call similar to what Gary Thorne did when Messier knocked the puck into the empty net. Gary Thorne said, "Do you believe it? Do you believe it?" And when Kreider scored his third goal to give the Rangers the lead, he said, "Can you believe it?" And when I heard that, I thought that was phenomenal. Now, whether or not that was done intentionally or not, I can't speak to that, but the parallel is nice, and it was a really good call. I'll say this. It felt for the majority of that game up until they got the spark goal from Kreider, was that, and this is the prevailing feeling that we felt during game 5, or at least what I felt during game 5, is that you know when the Rangers are going to have a bad night when they're making one chance and then an immediate exit. And obviously that's just sound defense, but the Rangers are really good at getting second and third chances. And when we saw that happen in game 5 against at Madison Square Garden, you began to see the same thing happen in game 6. So that's where a lot of our pessimism came in. But then all of a sudden the tide just changed somehow. And it was a good play by Roslovic to start everything. Really, that's what basically started one of the goals. And then you just began to see that they put a gear on, and that's what separates the Rangers from the Hurricanes, is that second gear when you're down and when you need it. Granted, they did it in the 2 games, but what ended up happening is that the Hurricanes could not do that the first 3 games of the series, something that the Rangers were able to do. So it was just nice to not have to see them, kind of go back to the Garden. And Kreider just, 100%, whether or not he wins the cup, that number's going up in the rafters.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, he also just and I know his, his way of going about it is not typical, right? He's kind of not the typical leadership type of hockey player that, you see throughout the league. He's just a little bit of an odd duck. He obviously has gone through, there's almost like 3 distinct eras of Kreider, right? There's kind of like
That's right.
wild young horse that we know of. And I know, the horse nickname has been long attached to him from his first 2 or 3 seasons, right? Starting in the 2012 playoffs. Then there's kind of like the, man, this guy is a stud, but also like disappears at times. And like, he kind of just was a very inconsistent, very frustrating player for, the middle kind of 6 or 7 seasons of his career.
Mm-hmm.
But since he exploded for 52 and has just become a bona fide 30, 35, 40 goal scorer in the league, I think he's really accepted and grown into his leadership role. And I think his leadership style fits with this Ranger team for sure.
Uh-huh.
You can see that he's one of the most important players and one of the great Rangers of all time. And look, it takes a little bit of the, I was listening to the other Blue Seats podcast, the Up in the Blue Seats from the New York Post, which is Brian Boyle, who does a great job, kind of hosts it with Molly Walker and Larry Brooks. Boyle kind of made the point that, how Kreider kind of called his shot a little bit. He said, I'm going to go get one as they were walking out of the locker room after the second intermission. He's like, guys say that all the time. He's like, I must have said that 300 times in my career. So like, it's kind of a normal thing that guys say, I think, to just like fire each other up and, maybe like just get a little bit of energy going. But it certainly adds to the mythology, that the longest tenured Ranger, the graybeard at 33 years old, stands up in the locker room and says, I'm going to go get us a goal, scores a hat trick. I mean, look, we eat that stuff up as fans. It's a great story, and I think it deserved flowers for Chris Kreider, who's been through it all here, right? Long playoff runs, Stanley Cup final disappointment, Eastern Conference final disappointment, went through an entire rebuild, and now at $6.5 million a year is maybe one of the best value contracts in the league. Happy he's here, and I can imagine he's going to finish his career here. Anything else on Game 6 from you, Nick, before we move on to Florida?
I mean, just to put a bow on it, I am probably the most outspoken person in terms of criticism of Chris Kreider, and I have been for quite a while. And for the fact that I have nothing bad to say about him, and the fact that I actually said that his performance in Game 6 is the greatest individual Ranger performance I've seen in my lifetime, because when, Messier did it in Game 6, I was very young. So, to actually see the performance and fully comprehend it and appreciate it, it is legitimately, it might be second after Hank's Game 7 against the Pens in 2014, but it's right there. Because I'm not gonna undersell Igor Shesterkin, because I think in everything in Game 6, it's definitely going to be known as the Chris Kreider game, as it should be. But the fact that Igor, he gave up 3 and the Aho goal wasn't the best one. It's one that Igor will probably stop 8 out of 10 times. But after that, he made the saves that they needed him to make to give them a chance to win. And I keep giving him credit on this, and I know people will say, well, Aho missed the net. Aho missed the net because Igor gave him 0 to shoot at. So in my book, that goes down as a save, not as a shot not on goal. So hats off to Igor Shesterkin for just channeling in, buckling down, and giving Chris Kreider a chance to put his name in the Ranger lore. So both of them, absolute superheroes. Love it.
Yeah. And, as we move to Florida, just to kind of transition a little bit, right? Like, obviously they are the headliners right now, right? Kreider, with that incredible singular performance. Igor's been a rock, but I mean, look at how they've gotten here through 10 playoff games, right? Mika Zibanejad leads them in scoring. Vincent Trocheck's been a constant presence. Panarin had 8 points in the series in 6 games. Yeah, maybe it sounds silly to say, maybe a slightly quiet 8 points, but 8 points nonetheless. Alexi Lafreniere is a point per game player in the playoffs. It's really been that the top guys have stepped up and done what they've needed to do, right? And so many playoff runs past, that hasn't been the case. And they've been able to make long runs because of goaltending or because of, amazing performances by their depth, or whatever it might be. But, if you're going to win a cup, your stars have to be stars. It's a terrible cliche. Everybody says it, but it's said so often because it's true. In that regard, what a matchup we have here against Florida. It's just, look, I think it's fair to say these are the 2 best teams in the East. They might be the 2 best teams in the whole NHL. I'm sure Dallas has something to say about that, but, I don't really include Edmonton in that, but I know some people do, and they are favored by some people out West. I don't think we're going to talk much about that, but, nevertheless, look, Florida's top guys, right? You look at it, Barkov, Reinhart, Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk, who sometimes slips out of mind because of all the other guys, Montour, Ekblad, and a great goalie in Bobrovsky. Line that up right against the Rangers' top guys, right, that I just named, plus Adam Fox, knock on wood, he's healthy or healthier. And man, this looks like it's going to be one hell of a series. I said before the Carolina series that, first of all, I picked Rangers in 7. Glad it didn't come to that. I said it was going to be the series that sort of wrung the most out of the fan base. I might need to revise that because I think this is going to be an absolute war with Florida. And JL, curious to get your early thoughts on, what you think this matchup is going to look like and how you think the Rangers match up against Florida.
So throughout the regular season, and obviously this is just regular season, so this doesn't really hold too much weight, but obviously it's essentially the same team. All of the games against the Panthers were really tight, and especially the last one, it went to a shootout. I think Panarin won it, if I'm correct. It was a 2-1 game. It was very close. Both teams are very similar in the aspect that they have not only a bunch of people who can, become rabble rousers, but they do have a lot of high-end skill in many different places up front. Carolina was different in the sense that, while they did have some skill, they didn't really have that person to take them over the edge. Florida has that. Alexander Barkov is nobody to scoff at. He's going to be one that's going to be really tough to defend, but also it's like the teams are basically parallel versions of each other, except one team is a little bit more offensively powered and another one is a little more defensively powered. They do play a similar style of system, and thank goodness you guys in the chat enlighten me with a lot of things and kind of helps my perspective on things. It seems like the Panthers are slightly less defensive oriented and they're not as regimented as Carolina, but they play a very similar style game. So I think that could potentially work in the Rangers' advantage. But this is probably, if I had to sit down and think about it, this is probably the most even matchup I can possibly think of, at least this postseason. Because if I take a look at some of the other matchups, even in previous seasons, I was actually having a conversation with somebody earlier today about this. And I said, if you look at the last time the Rangers made it to the Cup final, they essentially had the easiest route to go through, all
Mhm.
things considered, even though that wasn't exactly how it went. But if you look at it, they avoided a couple of big teams in Boston and Washington in 14.
Mhm.
And they faced Philly, Pittsburgh, and Montreal. And I think out
Yep.
of those 3 series, the Montreal series was probably the quote unquote easiest one.
Yep.
Because the first 2 went 7, and then the conference final went 6. So you could make those determinations on who is what. But with this series, it's really hard for me to actually give sort of analysis in the sense of, well, who may have an edge, or because I think it's so even, like the goalies complement each other well. The defense, offensive wise, could possibly complement each other. Even though Aaron Ekblad's not Adam Fox, he's still a good defenseman in his own right. Brandon Montour comes out of nowhere and is actually a force at some point. You have Mika Zibanejad, and then you have Alexander Barkov, and then you have Matthew Tkachuk, and then you could even factor in Matt Rempe or Philip Hedl if you want. So there's a lot of parallels on each side. This is probably most even, and this is what you want. This is what the NHL looks for in their postseason. Is you want teams who are either similar or teams who can match up very well, who are high octane, high powered, high skill, strong defense type teams. And I think it's the gap is very, very, very thin between the two teams. So I
Yep.
think it's just hard. That's really much what I can say about it. But it's a very even series, and I think this one's going to go to the brink, like you said. This is going to be the one that's going to wring the most out of us.
Yeah. So Nick, to that point, right? If you agree with JL, which I largely do, what do you think are let's do, we're Ranger fans, so let's be positive here, right? Especially before the series starts. If there's a place where the Rangers can get an edge, right? If they're going to win this series, what puts them over the edge? Like, where do you see the Rangers having, let's not call it a distinct advantage, but some kind of advantage that might tip the scales for them?
I really think when you look at the Rangers blue line 1 through 6, it's better than what Florida throws at you 1 through 6. I think Florida has a good blue line. I love Aaron Ekblad. I love Brandon Montour. I think Montour is going to get himself paid this summer, rightfully so. I think Gustav Forsling is now the best defensive defenseman that nobody talks about. He took that title over from Jacob Slavin this year.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a Norris Trophy for just defenseman, not best offensive defenseman, Forsling for me would have won it this year. So I love Gustav Forsling from that standpoint. But then I look at their third pair, and they have Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Dmitry Kulikov. That is something that the Rangers' bottom 6 can exploit, especially when you look at having Philip Hedl on your third line. That gives you a nice little matchup if you're Peter Laviolette that you can go to and exploit. So especially, and the other thing too, Barclay Goodrow, man, let me tell you something. The dude is having a great postseason.
He is.
I know Ranger fans love to malign him because of his contract, and I understand it, but give the man flowers when it's due, and he's having an incredible postseason run. So I think when you look at the Rangers' depth on the blue line, being able to drop Braden Schneider to the third pair, or if you reunite him with Keandre Miller, you put Jacob Trouba on the third pair. I think the Rangers, their bottom 2 lines, I think their bottom 6, the third and fourth lines, are better than what Florida can throw at us. And I just love our depth 1 through 6. And if Adam Fox is even a little bit healthier, and I pray to God that he is after 6 days off, then that gives the Rangers an advantage because nobody on that Florida blue line can do what Adam Fox can do.
It's so interesting how this is really where you get into the intrigue of the playoffs. Like you said, JL, right? This is what you want. You want best on best, star laden teams. Again, like, for as much as Carolina is beloved by, the deep, sort of hockey community, right? The analytics community, the sports books, odds makers love them, all that stuff. Just look at the names, right? I mean, they had to go get Jake Guentzel at the trade deadline, which, worked out to some extent because he had a great run with them. But like, Andrei Svechnikov just is not the level of star, MVP level player the way Panarin and Barkov and, Kachuk, and then at his best, like Zibanejad and like those guys are just a tier or even 2 tiers above a guy like Svechnikov, above a guy like Aho. Again, those are really, really good players. But if you want to look for reasons why Carolina continuously fall short, like they get beat by the other team's stars. And that was certainly the case in this past series with the Rangers, right? So, but this is where it does get really intriguing. And, again, I don't want to overemphasize this because, and I'll get to my kind of main point on this series in a second, but like the bottom 6, depth defense, portion of this series is really interesting, and how those matchups are going to play out. Do you use the Wenberg line against Barkov and try to get Mika and or Trocheck away from Barkov? Because, this is my main thing, guys. Like, and, this is not a novel take. I'm not an expert, and I'm not telling, any informed, fan anything they don't know here. But, I'm coming off of a very involved basketball season, so I'm thinking about things in basketball terms a lot. Like, Barkov is the head of the snake, right? You hear this term in basketball a lot. You got to cut off the head of the snake. So in basketball, that's always the other team's star player, right? If you're playing the Lakers, you got to stop LeBron James. If you're playing against the Celtics, you've got to stop Jason Tatum, blah, 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 blah. Like, this is about not getting destroyed by Barkov when he's on the ice. And I'm hopeful, and I believe this is a big part of the plan, because I trust Peter Laviolette and the staff immensely. A big part of the plan has to be, what are we doing about Barkov, right? How are we neutralizing him? How are we getting our best players away from him? Because, I mean, listen, he's a Selke Trophy, winning monster of a player. The guy is he's great. He's probably, I will reluctantly say, especially with Fox a little bit compromised, he's the best player in the series, right? In the first 2 rounds, the Rangers had the best player in the series. Take your pick, but they had the better player than their opponent. And I love Panarin. I think he's playing at a high level. Mika has totally upped his game in the playoffs. Kreider can clearly put the team on his back. Fox, if he's healthy, but like, Barkov's the best player in the series. So if you can just play them even when Barkov is on the ice, you've got a great chance of winning the series. And I like Matthew Tkachuk. I know Bennett and Reinhart and all those guys are really dangerous. They score a ton of goals. I hate Evan Rodriguez, and he kills the Rangers. I'm sure he's going to pop up once or twice with a dagger in this series, and I'm not looking forward to it. He did it for Pittsburgh a couple of years ago in round 1. But this is about Barkov. If you stop Barkov, if you neutralize Barkov, you're going to win the series. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but that's my sort of main hot take here going into this Eastern Conference final matchup.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say this about Barkov, because the thought just came to me. He essentially operates like a one-man show, just from what I've seen, and he's good enough to do that. Like you said, he will be the best player on the ice. And going back to the depth that Nick was talking about, that the Rangers have and Florida doesn't, Reinhart, Bennett, Tkachuk, all those guys, solid players, but the Rangers defense is strong enough to pretty much match against those guys. Barkov is a difference maker. I think you try to suffocate him as much as you possibly can. He's very nimble with the puck, just from all the highlights that we've seen, and just from having seen him do stuff against the Rangers. When I see him, I kind of think of a better UC Jokinen, if that makes any sense. And UC Jokinen was very good with the puck. Probably like a magician, so to speak. So I think they just need to suffocate him, frustrate him, get him to, don't give him a lot of space. And I think the Rangers D is good enough to do that. I even think a guy like Jacob Trouba could even kind of handle it in spurts, depending on what kind of matchup is out there. But it just all depends on who the partner is there. So I think for this series, I think the Rangers really need to have the third forward really not make any mistakes coming back, because that's what bit them in the butt against Carolina those last 2 games up until the third period of Game 6, is that there was really no one coming back to kind of fill the third forward spot. And the third forward back is usually the one that covers the center for the most part. So if they can just do that, I think they'll be able to neutralize Barkov effectively, and don't give him enough room. because you give that dude a second of space, that puck is going to the back of your net.
I have two thoughts on this. One of the guys who I don't think gets enough credit for Florida for how good he is and the way he complements the way that Barkov plays is Carter Verhaeghe. Verhaeghe is so good and so sneaky.
Yeah, he's
He
great.
he. Oh, yeah, I mean, watching him and Barkov together, it's like watching peanut butter and jelly. They just go together. One of the biggest things about Barkov too that I've picked up just watching Florida, he has a very long stick and he's got a long reach, especially defensively. And that's something that definitely helps him out on the defensive end of the ice. So knowing where he's at and, just if you're Peter Laviolette, whatever line you're putting out against him, you have to be sure. So I would not want to put the Mika Zibanejad line out there because I just believe that Barkov could shut down Zibanejad. I would 100% love to run the Wenberg line, and I would go with Braden Schneider and Keandre Miller as a pair against the Barkov line, and then go with Fox and Lindgren against the Kachuk line. Because I just think with Miller's ability to skate and his long reach, that is enough to drive Barkov crazy defensively. So I think that's one of those things where if you're Laviolette, and this is where it's going to come into play. This is where the coaching, matchup and being able to play chess and not checkers is really going to come into play. And I mean, we saw Laviolette do it in Game 6, putting Trouba back with Miller, and it allowed Rod Brindamore to not be able to send the Aho line out against Gustafsson and Trouba, which is what they did in Game 4 and how they absolutely destroyed us in Game 4. So it's one of those things. It's a small move. It's stuff like that that's really going to win the Rangers this series. And I also think, too, if you're the Rangers, Florida is undisciplined. Any Paul Maurice coached team throughout time has always been undisciplined. They take stupid penalties. Nick Cousins is one of the biggest morons in the game. If you're able to rattle them early and get some power plays, because, look, that's where the Rangers' bread is buttered. They're they're an average team 5-on-5, but where they really get going is on their power play. Make Florida be undisciplined. Get to your power play. Get to what you do best. And Florida's penalty kill isn't the greatest. So I think if the Rangers are able to do that kind of stuff, I think they're gonna be in for a really good series.
Yeah, and we're going to continue the chat here because we got tons of questions, and I'm sure most of them are going to be looking forward to the Florida series. So JL, if you want to cue those up, I'll just add one thing as you do that. Look, there is a goaltending edge here as well. Look, as good as Bobrovsky is, and yes, can he get hot and pitch a .935 save percentage and win a series on his own? Absolutely. But our colleague at Blue Seat Blogs, if you haven't read his piece yet, Justin Rutherford wrote a great piece breaking down Bobrovsky's, game, his setup, his stance, his strengths, his weaknesses. And, basically one of the things that Justin pointed out was that if you get him moving laterally, he's vulnerable. He is not a great high danger chance, save percentage guy. He eats on low and medium danger shots. So where do the Rangers make their money, right? Whether it's 5-on-5 or 5-on-4, high danger passes across the slot line, right? A lot of side to side movement for the goalie. Rangers have been doing this forever, by the way. It's something that the franchise has, I think, frankly, been ahead of the curve on, and they do not get enough credit for it. There's a reason they always outperform their expected goals totals and have a high shooting percentage. It's because, yes, they have great shooting talent, but they also focus on being able to create cross ice passes and scoring chances that way. So if they can get to that game, then they are going to have success against Bobrovsky. But, so I do believe there is a goaltending edge for the Rangers here. I do believe Shesterkin is the better goalie, especially just the way he's locked in right now. It's as we said earlier, pretty fun to watch. So, all right, with that, JL, why don't we get to the questions because we have quite a few, and I want to make sure we get them all.
All right, sounds good. So before we read the questions, I just want to give a quick shout out to my friend Josh. He listened. He's a Buffalo Sabres fan, but he listened to the podcast for the first time the other day, and he enjoyed our banter very much. Josh, I'm sorry that you're a Sabres fan. There's always room on the bandwagon for the Rangers. Come and join us. Thank you for listening, and thank you to all those who listen, and thank you for those who gave us questions. We love answering your questions. You guys are absolutely the best. So First question comes from one of my favorite follows on Twitter. I always say this, and he doesn't acknowledge that I say this. Is one of my favorite follows on Twitter. This is at Bill Suspill, John Cougar Colleen Camp, and he asked us after scolding us for asking us a bunch of questions and us getting more. He asks us which Panthers player most embodies the concept of Florida man.
Sam Bennett.
Really?
Yeah. Torn between him and Nick Cousins, obviously, because as you said, Nick Cousins might be the biggest moron in the league, and that's kind of a prerequisite for Florida man vibes.
But you know what? I'll say this: Ryan Lomberg.
Yeah, that's a good one. You're right.
That's a good one.
Why do I say
Ryan Lomberg?
Why do I say Ryan Lomberg? Because every time he's gone on the ice, he's kind of like Tom Wilson without the skill and the grit. You know, there is nothing about this guy. And look, I'll say this: he could probably beat me up. He's a professional hockey player, but I'm a fan. I'm allowed to have this opinion. I think he's kind of a weasel, as David Letterman used to say about executives. He's a weasel. I don't think he's any good at a game. He's got 3 goals on the season. I don't think he's good. He's terrible. He's good at causing noise. You know, at least Sean Avery had talent. This guy doesn't. And he has a very punchable face, and I don't like him. I think he embodies Florida man, because most people who are Florida men or Florida people don't have any sort of discernible skill outside of being stupid. So
I'll just say it. Sam Bennett looks like he makes moonshine out of his bathtub. So that for me gets the vote for Florida man.
Makes sense.
You've convinced me, JL. It's Lomberg. And I remember from the last couple of run, even 2 years ago when they got knocked out in the first round, he was running around doing all sorts of stupid shit. So and he was very annoying last year as well. So I'm with you on Lomberg.
All right. So this next question comes from someone familiar. This comes from Becky at BHabs37. I've never heard of her before, but she goes, "Hey gang, just wondering if the Rangers have that dog in them. I'll hang up and listen." I am tempted to do a Francesa impression here, because the hang up and listen is always such a staple of WFAN. But guys, do they have that dog in them? Do they?
I have been saying that we're at a point now where, and look, Nick, we had a very spirited debate in the chat earlier about, kind of the way analytics work and the models and how they've predicted or tried to predict the outcomes of these series. And I'm pro analytics. I know you are too, and certainly the Rangers use them. Laviolette is one of the more forward-thinking coaches in the game. It's a young staff. I'm sure the Rangers use a boatload of tools. This is not about that, but I've been jokingly saying I'm going to stop looking at the charts, because the only stat that matters now is JWB per 60, or just win baby per 60. And what's funny is, I joke, but also, the Rangers clearly have a higher JWB per 60 than Carolina. It's why they keep beating them in the playoffs. Every other metric pretty much favors Carolina, and yet the Rangers keep beating them. So honestly, I know Becky, was just having fun with that question, but hell yeah, the Rangers have that dog in them. This is a team that all year has made no bones about we are going for the Stanley Cup. All we are going to do every single day at practice from the moment we got to training camp was focus on stuff that can get us to the finish line. And they are doing that. And the proof is in the pudding. They're 8-2 in the playoffs. There's no reason to doubt this team anymore. Now it's just about executing.
I've never seen a Rangers team with more fight and more heart and more determination than this group. Because it would have been very easy after Game 5 to just be well, we can give a good effort in Carolina, but we don't have to go all out, because Game 7's in our building. That they came out and they said no. We're ending this tonight. They're not coming back. We're not giving them any kind of hope. They have that bite. And look, people can make fun of me for saying this, but there's definitely a Rempe factor in there. Because when he joined the team, and I think the Stadium Series game embodied it, they hold their head a little bit higher. They puff their chest out a little bit more. because they just had that swag, man. And there's something about that you can't, no chart can quantify it. It's just this team, they have a belief. They are a bunch of dogs. I mean, you look at Chris Kreider, Barkley Goodrow, Rempe, Jimmy Vesey. Jimmy Vesey's turned into one of the most underrated players on this team, constantly doing the right things that help this team win. Will Coley. I mean, there's just so many guys on this team to love who have fight, who bring it every single night. Yeah, 100% dogs all day.
Well, and then and also just to add to that, you get it from the top guys now too. I mean, this was the thing, right? This was the doubts about the core was like, yeah, they're great players. Like, yeah, they're good dudes. Everybody's friends. It's a great vibe. But like, can they friggin' bear down and do it when it gets tough in the playoffs? And like, so far, yes. Like, Kreider puts on a legendary performance. Mika completely upped his game. Trocheck, again, and I love Igor. And I think, probably the way it works out is if they do make it all the way and win the cup, Igor probably would win the Conn Smythe just because the Rangers are always like a goalie first team in everybody's eyes. And that's fine. And they deserve to be because Igor is great. But like, to me, Trocheck is my Conn Smythe favorite. Like, I would love for him to win it. I think he's played well enough to deserve it. He literally does anything they ask him to do and does it well. Panarin throwing a reverse check on TJ Oshie in game 2 of the first round. Like, the whole team this year, the whole team has it. And it's a credit to the coaching staff because the roster hasn't changed that much from 2 years ago. Sure, like you said, you add the Rempe ingredient, you add, you add a couple of other, ancillary pieces like Roslovic and Winberg and Cooley, but like most of the same guys, and they have a completely different attitude this year.
Yeah, so I'm just going to compound on something that Nick said. When they had Ryan Reeves for that playoff run in 2022, they weren't supposed to do that. Not that team, no. But having a guy like Reeves kind of had their head high a little bit, and then when Rempe came aboard, you can just tell something changed, like you said, and they seem to not only rally around him, but they're rallying around each other. And it seems as if the right people are in place to get the best out of them, because they probably were dogs beforehand, but they needed somebody to kind of stoke the fire a little bit. It's kind of someone to throw more meat into the cage to kind of get them to go a little bit. And just to do this, because it's been in my head for the last minute or so. Yeah, thank you, Becky. Thank you for the call. First time, long time. Yeah, no, the Rangers got dogs. The Rangers got dogs. What do you mean the Rangers got dogs? Oh, that's more Jerry Seinfeld than Mad Dog. I can't do it. Sorry. Anyways, so yeah, no, I agree with you guys 100%. And I love that JWB percentage thing, Rob, because now that's gonna be stuck in my head.
I'm gonna start putting it on like charts and graphs like Luker does.
Yes. So, all right. Next question comes from @30 on Broadway. This totally doesn't seem like somebody here. No, I'm kidding. Someone posted a question now. So @30 on Broadway, 30 on Broadway, Talking Blue Shirts asks us, do you
this
think
was 100% Chris, by the way?
I figured it was.
Your other half.
I figured it was. Yes. This is his other half on his podcast. And he writes, do you think the Rangers insert Matt Rempe back into the lineup to counter Matt Cook? I mean, Nick Cousins.
I honestly, I have to believe Rempe's going to get a game or two in this series at some point. Look, Florida, they try to play, in basketball, they call it bully ball. Florida does the same thing. They try to bully you. They try to run over you. They try and intimidate you and back you down. I mean, we just went over it. The Rangers got a bunch of dogs. They're not going to do that to this Ranger team. Just with Trouba and Goodrow alone, they're not going to do that. But you insert Matt Rempe into the equation, they're definitely not. If Nick Cousins starts acting like a moron, which, I think 5 minutes into the game, you'll see it. But I definitely think we're going to get a Rempe sighting at some point to put his ass in check.
So I actually, and this is again not an original thought, although I shouldn't say that. It was also said by Sean Avery, who I saw on Twitter. Somebody posted it today. He has a podcast and he does cameos, and Sean's got a screw or two loose, but he is still a very ardent supporter of the Rangers and one of my favorites. In my early 20s, the age I was when Avery was playing. So he'll always be near and dear to me, even though he's got some, questionable elements of his non-hockey life. But he said, I don't know if he said this specifically, but was kind of pointing to Rempe as being a factor in the series. Now, so far, the lineup we've seen in practice has indicated that it's not going to be Rempe. It's going to be Filipino. They're going to bump Cooley down to the fourth line, kind of go with the alignment that they used in Game 3 of the Carolina series. My thing is, and you just said this, Nick, right? Florida's going to come out and they're going to basically try and bully you. Why not play Rempe in Game 1 and initiate? Like, just send him out there. Send him out there on the third shift of the game and have him light someone up. And see how Florida responds, right? And almost preempt the bullshit that Florida is going to pull at some point. To me, Game 1 is the spot for him, because if you win, here's how I look at it, right? And I don't want to be pessimistic here, right? But if you lose Game 1, he's definitely not coming in for Game 2. If you win Game 1, you're probably not going to change the lineup, and you're not going to play him on the road. We've already seen the perils of that, and there's too much potential for a bad matchup, and Laviolette doesn't want to use him for more than 6-7 minutes a game at most. So there is limited versatility there from Rempe, even though I do think he brings tangible value. To me, Game 1's the spot. Now, will they put him in the lineup? They very well might. And you know what? That might be better for Filipino, right? Give him an extra couple of days to just make sure he's 100% right before you throw him into the fire. So I would look out for that as a slight possibility, but I do also think that the Rangers are eager to just put their best 12 forwards on the ice. No slight to Rempe, of course. That's just the consequence of having a deep team.
Yeah, no, it's pretty much already a given that Heedle's going to play the first game, which I'm fine with. But I think depending on how that goes and depending on the outcome of the game, I do think Rempe does see some action. Filipino has been sick. It's been going around that there's kind of a flu, or I don't know if it's passed already or not, but they've been hit with a bug, which kind of explains their Game 5 and early Game 6 performances.
I think a lot of guys were sick Game 5. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, also you have Heedle with his, still coming off of a head injury. So I think depending on how Game 1 goes, I think either Rempe comes in for Heedle, or I even think Rempe comes in for Cooley. And, I hate to say that about the kid. He's definitely shown up in the playoffs. Like, he's very noticeable when he's out there. He does have a goal, which was really nice, by the way. But I just
does Rempe,
think,
though. Rempe's got a goal too.
Yeah, but Rempe has a goal too. That's right. So it's kind of like, what do you do? Do you want to give Phil work, who's a big body, can move the puck well down low, rounds out your bottom six? Or do you want to have the intimidation factor where you have this 6'8" behemoth of a man throwing body checks around and because it's not like that the Rangers don't have guys that could stand up for themselves, like you mentioned, Lindgren, Goodrow, Trouba, Will Cooley's no slouch. So, and then with the fact that everybody's kind of adding a little bit more of a chip on the shoulder, they're not just and Vincent Trocheck's another one. Vincent Trocheck is also one to get. This guy will laugh in your face for whatever reason it is and make you look like a chump. So, I think if Cousins does something stupid, then I think you see Rempe Game 2. All right. Next question comes from Chris C. at Chris Saletti. Similar last name to somebody here. And he asks, he asks, who scores first in this series, Alex Wennberg or Igor Shesterkin? Great question, Chris. I love it.
Yeah, obviously, Chris and I obviously talk plenty about the Rangers, and I don't want to speak for him, but I think he appreciates Alex Wennberg. I think we all do. I think he is also rightfully frustrated, like many of us are, that Alex Wennberg can't put the puck in the ocean. I mean, he's just a guy who has no finish, no scoring ability whatsoever. So, that said, I think, Chris's question brings up an interesting point, right? That third line, whether it's Kakko, Wennberg, and Heedle, or Cooley, Wennberg, and Kakko, we know that they're great at what they do, right? Down low possession, they limit scoring chances. They just play a heavy, playoff style game. They're probably the best, grinded out cycling line the Rangers have. with absolutely zero end product. And I think, like we talked about earlier in the show, if the advantage for the Rangers is in the bottom six, then the bottom six needs to score, right? It can't just be territorial advantage, because if you assume the top six cancels each other out, or maybe even Florida's top six edges the Rangers, then you absolutely are going to need goals from the third and fourth line in this series. And Wenberg so far has not been a source of any. So to answer the question, I will say Wenberg, but possible Igor Potts an empty netter too.
Alex Wenberg, all Swedish, no Finnish. It sucks, but that's where we're at. But no, I really like Wenberg. All jokes aside, I think having Hedel on his wing gives him a playmaker that will free up space, will give him time and space that he can get, a nice greasy one in front. I mean, he did hit a post against Carolina in Game 4. I mean, the Rangers hit a lot of posts in Game 4. Damn post! They would have closed that out. There would have been a sweep had they could have found the back of the net. But no, I think Wenberg's definitely going to get one, and I think it's going to be one of those that's going to be a crucial one. It might be a game winner, it might be an overtime game winner. I just have a feeling the depth here is going to show up in a big way, and he's a huge part of it. So I'm definitely taking Wenberg to score, but man, it would kind of be great to see Igor hit the empty net that sends us to the Cup final. That would be kind of dope.
Well, it almost happened because Igor had the shot at the empty net in round 1 in the clincher, and Ovechkin had to snatch it out of the air. But
one contribution of the series for Washington.
Right. He's a stiff anyways these days. You guys touched on it, regular season. Did he even? I can't even remember if he even scored a regular season goal with the Rangers.
He had one goal.
Maybe.
Yeah, he had one goal.
Yep. There you go. So, but I'm not too concerned because, like Nick said, his goal is probably going to come at a really crucial time. And to add to your point, Rob, that he's done very well as a shutdown center, but again, like you guys said, it's got to get to the point where something's got to give. And again, like you guys said, Hedel being on that line when they were together, they look good. They were there. There was more of an offensive flair to that third line. And I think, and then it kind of goes back to the previous question briefly is that, what exactly are you looking for when it comes to the production from Hedel relative to Rempe? So I think maybe Wenberg gets one this series. It's probably going to be a deflection or maybe a tap-in. And I think it'll be in a really big moment, but it would be really funny if Igor were to get an empty net before Wenberg. So I think that would just be utterly hilarious. This next question comes from @msilvers1979, and he asks us, who are you expecting a big series from?
It's got to be Artemi Panarin, right?
Oh, 100%.
I mean, everybody to this point has gotten Panarin here. I mean, he had a really good series against Washington, came up big in Game 6 with 2 assists against Carolina, but he hasn't had that Nathan McKinnon moment of, I'm just going to be the best player on the ice and nobody's going to do anything to stop me. And, try what do what you want, but you're not stopping me. We haven't really seen that game yet. And I mean, we saw him do that a lot in the regular season. And a lot of that had to do with winning puck battles, winning board battles, making those extra plays to keep, a play in the offensive zone alive. He hasn't really done that so far yet in the playoffs. So I really believe that this is going to be the series of Artemi Panarin.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with his line mate Vincent Trocheck. I'm just going to stay on. I'm going to continue the agenda here of Trocheck for Conn Smythe. I just think that he's like the perfect fit for this series. He was a good fit for the Carolina series too, but like just his ability to sort of like neutralize / like, not back down, right? Not back down from whatever BS Florida throws at him. man, does that guy just have a knack for scoring in big spots? I mean, let's not forget too, another sort of underrated storyline from game 6 is Trocheck gets the first goal, right? So the Rangers are down 2-0. Building is on fire in Raleigh, and Trocheck gets that deflection. Obviously, super broken play, horrible giveaway by, I think it was Orlov, put it right on the stick of Panarin. Freddie Anderson stumbling all over the place, but Trocheck deflects the puck and gets the Rangers on the board, which is huge. He finds a way to make a big play in a big spot, and I expect that to continue here in this round. And again, I'm on a Trocheck for Conn Smythe agenda to the point where I should probably maybe put a little bit of a wager on it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Panarin, but I do see your point about Trocheck because he is essentially one of those glue guys. And especially with the way that Florida plays, I think his style fits playing against that type of team. But something in me just tells me, that Panarin, getting out of the suffocating sort of, defense that Carolina has, and the fact that I can't count how many times I've seen him just snipe one down on Sergei Bobrovsky. I think we might get a couple of those this series, truth be told. So I think this is where Panarin really begins to kind of show that he has really dodged the accusations of not being a playoff performer if he hasn't already done so now as is. So, all right, next question. Well, these are 2 questions from the same person. This comes from Kevin at Spozo211. And the first question he asks is, do you keep Key and Trouba together? Will we see Zach Jones this round? And then he asks, with Tony D and Marchand eliminated, who takes the lead for the player you want to punch in the face most?
Again, well, that's a really good question, because the Rangers certainly have played some lineup games in practice and have not, shown their hand. And it's been small little tweaks, right? The insertion of Hedel, the changing of defense pairs. Nick, I think you made a great point earlier about, this series being a good matchup for the Schneider-Miller pair. So maybe they go back to that. You know what? I mean, maybe this is just me overthinking it or, whatever, but I could see that happening, actually. I could see them going back to Miller and Schneider and Trouba Gustafsson. But I also, the other part of me is like, well, coaches don't want to change lineups, after wins and after a successful series. But I don't know. I don't really have a feeling about that. And the punchable face thing, like, I think we're kind of same vein as the Florida man question. Probably Lomberg, especially on the Panthers.
If we see Zach Jones in this series, something has gone horribly wrong for Adam Fox, in my opinion. I think that's the only guy that Jones comes in for. So if Fox is really hurt or something, happens to him, I think that's the only time you're seeing Zach Jones. I would go back to Miller Schneider, and I would roll with Trouba and Gustafsson just because I think you can shelter Trouba again against their bottom 6, and you can really try and lock down and zone in on Barkov and or Tkachuk, whichever way Laviolette and Housley want to go with that matchup. And for me, it's either between Matthew Tkachuk or Sam Bennett. But I really think I want to go with Sam Bennett because, look, I used to like Sam Bennett when he was on the Flames, but this is a guy who, make no bones about it, he plays on the line and he goes over the line. What he did to Brad Marchand, if he did what he did to any other player and it wasn't Brad Marchand, people would have been up in arms. But because it was Brad Marchand, who he himself is a weasel or a rat, nobody really cared and nobody was that upset. But yeah, I think I really want to punch Sam Bennett in the face and shave his stupid ass mustache.
Yeah, just to quickly answer the last part of that question, it's Ryan Lomberg again. From all the reasons I stated previously, coming in a close second would be if Ratko Gudas was still on the team, he would be number 1. But then it's him, and then it's obviously Matthew Tkachuk. But in regards to keeping Trouba and Miller together, I think you try it, like, like Rob alluded to, nobody, coaches don't want to change lineups and this and that and the fourth. But I think you can kind of get away with it a little more with those two together for matchup sake. As much as I thought they were good in the regular season, I'm still kind of, I'm very shaky on Trouba and Gustafson because I just feel like there's something that's not right. And the way that they both broke down in against Carolina, I just feel like something didn't sit right with me. Then again, I'm not the coach, and I'm here instead of coaching the New York Rangers. And as far as Zach Jones this round, somebody has to get hurt, like Nick alluded to. Adam Fox is essentially playing on one leg, and he's gonna stick it out for the sake of not only the team but also for himself. So if like he said, if Zach Jones comes in, we've got ourselves a problem in any facet. It's not just Fox. If Keandre Miller gets hurt, or if Braden Schneider gets hurt, or even Trouba or Gustafson, and this is no disrespect to Zach Jones. I think it's primarily known amongst all of us here that we're really high on the kid, and he's more than likely going to be the third pair D across from Schneider next season. But right now it's kind of like, well, if we have to dip into the reserves, it's not a good sign. But then it could also be seen as a good sign because the Rangers have really good depth. So, all right. And our final question, this is, this one is something, I'll tell you. This comes from at Blue Seat Blogs. I've never heard of this guy before. Mr. David Shapiro, our fearless leader who likes to yell at clouds. He knows where that reference is from. And he asks us, and I feel like, I don't know how much Simpsons you guys watch or consume, but I send him a lot of Simpsons stuff. I think this is where this originates from. He goes, Rangers as Simpsons characters: Homer, Bart, Marge, Lisa, Mr. Burns, Apu, Abe, and Mr. Ned Flanders. And then his second question: which retired fan favorite best embodies the legacy that is Hank Scorpio? Goodness gracious, David, are you kidding me? This is like a whole different episode if we have to, really go into this. So I don't know if you guys got any of that. So
part 2, I definitely couldn't do. Part 1, I could probably take a stab at because I have, I haven't been living under a rock for the last 35 years. I've watched a fair share of Simpsons, but I'm not by any means a regular consumer. But I appreciate the longevity and the genius and cultural significance of the show. But JL, I'm happy to let you handle this one. And yeah, part 2 of that question, I have no idea. Might as well bow out.
So I'll answer the second one first because that's the one that I think is the toughest. So Hank Scorpio is a villain. He's in that. That's one of the funniest episodes I think ever. The Hammock District, and he ends up gifting him, instead of it being the Dallas Cowboys, Hank Scorpio gives him the Denver Broncos. The whole episode basically revolves around Homer looking for a new job. He goes to this place where Hank Scorpio recruits him, and it turns out he's like essentially a Bond villain. And it's a really funny episode. So I think if you really want to embody Hank Scorpio, I think you have to go James Dolan, because James Dolan is probably in many facets of Ranger lore. And he said fan favorites, but it's really hard to use. I mean, if you want to say Sean Avery, maybe. I can't think of anyone that's sort of like an evil villain outside of those two. So I'm just going to say Sean. Well, that's not bad, actually. Jacob Trouba. I could see that. But yeah, so it's either between Avery, Dolan, or Trouba. And I may not be answering the question to the way that he wants it, but deal with it, Dave. And then Rangers as Simpsons characters, Homer would probably be somebody has to be oblivious, and it's definitely not Rapey.
No, I like Rapey kind of gives off that vibe a little bit. It's either for me, it would either be him or VC.
No,
why not Kreider? Homer, isn't he like the father figure?
I
For
was
better
gonna
or
say
worse?
I was gonna say Kreider was more Mo.
No, but he doesn't mention Mo specifically in the question. That's the only thing. Mo is just that's a that's on a different stratosphere with Mo. Homer, I would probably have to say I'd probably say Truba as Homer because he seems like the kind of goofy guy, right? Bart would probably be Lafreniere. Marge is probably Mika.
Mm-hmm.
Least, I can't believe I'm actually doing this on a podcast.
Kreider's Lisa, actually, right?
Yeah, Kreider could be Lisa. Yeah.
Renaissance person. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Burns would probably be. You could probably say Jimmy VC.
Or Barkley
Probably.
Goodrow,
Or Barkley Goodrow.
especially with that name.
Let's see. Apu. Oh, that's a tough one. Apu. Because the thing is, with Apu, you have to separate the clearly obvious stereotype that they're lampooning to the actual person that he is, and he's actually a really good character in the show. I can't answer that one. Abe Simpson, that would be you, David. And then Flanders would probably be, oh man, kind of like a goody two shoes kind of.
I thought that might be
I did-
Lafreniere for Flanders.
That
but
could be
you-
that could that could be actually, you know what? I'll change that. Lafreniere will be Flanders, and then I think Bart would be
but maybe
Jimmy
Rempe's
VC.
Bart.
Yeah, no, yes, perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, Matt Rempe is Bart because they're
Yeah.
like mischievous, but they're not stupid. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah, like
Just sort of
youthful
kind of-
energy and yeah.
right? And Truba can complement that with Homer.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so
Okay.
oh, that was the
We worked it out.
there we go. So I am eagerly awaiting to hear Dave's response on those questions and answers to that. So I think we're good on questions. So thank you again, everybody, for sending in your questions. We love answering them. It adds a lot more to our discussion, and we appreciate you taking the time out to listen and send them.
Nice. Yeah, thanks everyone. We always really appreciate it. All right, let's do it, guys. It is a preview episode. We have to do predictions. Nick, give me a series prediction.
Rangers in 7. It feels like it's the year. I don't really go off the Team of Destiny thing too much, but they finally have shown me that this team is different from prior Ranger teams that couldn't get it done. They finished the Caps early. They won this series in 6 when they were pretty much on death's door of a 7th game. They just keep finding ways to win, and even though it doesn't fit nice in a tidy box that the analytic community would want, they just keep getting the job done, and I think they're going to do it again in 7.
JL.
Rangers in 7. Like you said, this is going to be the one that's going to wring the most out of us. And I just think the Rangers have the edge. And as you affectionately like to say, just win, baby. And like the team likes to say, there's no quit in New York.
Yeah, it just feels like 7. Couldn't agree more. And of course, picking the Rangers here. I mean, at this point, how can you not believe? It's been such an enjoyable run. And all these playoff runs are enjoyable in their own way, but this just feels like everybody is connected, right? There, from the coaches to management, to the coaches, to the players, to the fan base. It's like there's this overwhelming sense of like, this is the year. Like it doesn't have to be the year. Like it's not this team's last ride or anything like that. But man, like it feels close, even though they're only halfway there. Florida's a formidable opponent, but yeah, I think it goes 7. I think the Rangers win a tight game 7 at the Garden, and we will have a Stanley Cup final to look forward to. So, Nick,
before
always a
you end
pleasure.
I
Go
just
ahead.
want to say
Yeah.
one thing. Sorry. So I just want to give credit. I saw this on Twitter. You did say halfway there, so I have to do this. Whoa, we're halfway there. Whoa, Alexis Lafreniere. Sorry, I had to do it. I saw. I know that was kind of a thing going around, but Bill Suspill made a nice little edit with that. I just couldn't help myself. So sorry.
If this was a true, and the Rangers have a great creative fan base, but if we were like a European soccer style fan base like that did impromptu songs like that, that would be absolutely perfect.
100%.
So that fits like a glove. All right, yeah, no. Before I sign off, that's your final thought, JL. Nick, any final thoughts?
Yes,
from
it
you?
is.
I just, this ride has been incredible, and I'm really not ready for it to end. And a series like this against a team like Florida, this is why you have to end series early. I mean, Chris Kreider said it 2 years ago in the conference final. They had no gas towards the end of that series against Tampa, and it was because they let two inferior teams take them to game sevens, earlier in the playoffs. And that's why you have to get the job done, get rest, get reset, refocused. They're doing it, and I think they're going to get it done. I really have belief and faith in this team.
Well, we'll watch it all unfold. We'll talk about it next week. We'll probably be about 3-4 games into the series, so we'll be exciting to speak to everybody again. As always, thank you for listening to Live from the Blue Seats, and we will chat with you next week.